There are 5 turntables made between 1968 and 1984 that most working hi-fi reviewers have never touched, never reviewed, and never mentioned, and 2 of them were used in broadcast studios that demanded 8 hours of flawless performance every single day. The forums will tell you to buy a Rega or a Project, and those are fine tables, but they were designed to a retail price point, not to a radio engineer's brief. So why is almost nobody talking about the gear that was actually built to professional standards? And why can you still buy it for less than a mid-range cartridge? I want to tell you about the moment I almost made an expensive mistake. I was standing in a hi-fi shop in the city, the kind with hardwood floors and ceiling speakers playing Norah Jones at reference volume, and I had a Lin LP-12 in front of me with a $4,500 price tag and a very patient salesman telling me it was the last turntable I would ever need to buy. He was probably right. The LP-12 is a legendary piece of kit, beautifully made, holds its value. The audiophile press has been writing about it since 1972. I walked out without it, not because I couldn't afford it, but because something nagged at me. Every table in that shop was either currently in production or had been recently discontinued. Every single one had a manufacturer website, a distributor, a warranty card. I kept thinking, is this really all there is? 6 months later, I was at an estate sale in the outer suburbs, which is a thing I do on Saturday mornings more often than my wife thinks is healthy. There was a turntable on a side table in the lounge room, under a dust cover that hadn't been lifted in years. Denon DP-75, Japanese direct drive, manufactured 1975. The estate belonged to a retired sound engineer. I paid $280 for it. I drove home, cleaned the contacts, put on a Shure V15 Type 4 I had sitting in a box, and played the first side of a Japanese pressing of Kind of Blue. I sat in the chair for 40 minutes and did not move. That table had been sitting in a house for 15 years, and it still had a bearing so smooth I could spin the platter with one finger and count to 12 before it stopped. That was 4 years ago. Since then, I have tracked down and listened to more than 30 vintage tables from the golden era, which I count as roughly 1968 to 1984, when vinyl was the only home audio format, record companies were the biggest businesses on earth, and the engineering budgets at places like Denon, Victor, Pioneer, Technics, and Thorens were genuinely enormous. I have bought and sold most of them. 5 I would never sell. These are the 5. Quick word before I go further. The old methods my family uses, there is more of it than fits in any one video. I gathered the whole of it into a book you can buy in our pinned comment below. The book is the long version. If you want it, it is there. I will not mention it again. So if these tables are this good, why has nobody told you about them? The answer is simple and a little uncomfortable, and it starts with how the modern hi-fi press actually works. A review sample is a thing a manufacturer sends you for free, on loan, so you can write about it. Every major audio publication in the world, print and online, runs on review samples. A new Rega Planar 3 can be palletized and shipped to 50 reviewers across 4 continents in the same week. A 1977 Denon DP-75 cannot. Denon isn't making them anymore. There's no PR budget. There's no distributor relationship. So the Rega gets reviewed in every publication from What Hi-Fi to Stereophile. The Denon gets forgotten. This is not a conspiracy. It's just the way the incentives stack up. And then there's the forum problem. The audio forums, the ones that have been running since the early internet and are still the default reference point for anyone getting into vinyl, were largely populated by enthusiasts who came of age in the 1990s and early 2000s when CD was king and vinyl was a niche. Their frame of reference for good turntables is whatever was available new in the mid-range bracket at the time they got back into records. Rega, Project, Music Hall, good tables, not the tables I'm describing. What most people get wrong is they equate audiophile with new, or they equate it with expensive and new. The tables on this list were expensive, in some cases jaw-droppingly expensive at the time of manufacture. The Technics SP-10 MK2 cost the equivalent of roughly $8,000 in today's money when it launched in 1975. It was bought by radio stations and broadcast facilities, not by home listeners. It had to meet a professional brief: low wow and flutter, stable speed under varying stylus drag, quiet enough that you could play it live to air without motor noise bleeding into the signal. Its wow and flutter spec is 0.025%. Most new tables under $1,000 cannot match that number. Some tables at $2,000 cannot match that number. The counterintuitive truth at the center of all this is straightforward. The best turntables ever made are mostly out of production. They were built in a 15-year window when vinyl was the dominant format. Engineering budgets were unlimited, and the manufacturers competing for professional contracts had to hit specifications that have never been commercially necessary since. You can still buy them. You just have to know which 5 and what to look for. Here is the first one, the Denon DP-75, made in Japan from 1975. This is a direct drive broadcast deck. Direct drive means the platter is mounted directly to the motor shaft, no belt, no idler wheel, just a servo-controlled motor spinning at exactly 33 1/3. The DP-75's servo circuit is so well damped that you can put your hand flat on the spinning platter and feel essentially nothing. No vibration, no cogging, just smooth rotation. NHK Radio use these. That is the Japanese national broadcaster, which is roughly the equivalent of the BBC in terms of technical standards, and they did not buy equipment that wasn't exceptional. The one trick you need to know before you buy: the tone arm socket on the DP-75 accepts an SME3009, which is one of the finest arms ever made for the money and can be found in working condition on eBay for $70 to $120. Buy the DP-75 body for $200 to $300, which is where they settle at estate sales and on Craigslist from people who don't know what they have. Add the SME arm and you have a studio-grade turntable for under $420. At that price, it is almost offensive. The second table is the one I tell people about when they want to understand what high-end engineering actually felt like. The Victor TT-101, made by JVC in Japan in 1977. Victor was the Japanese arm of JVC, and their broadcast and consumer research sat in the same building. The TT-101 was a flagship consumer table, but it was built to broadcast specs because that was the only way Victor knew how to build things at the time. The platter weighs 2.8 kilograms, quartz-locked direct drive. The speed stability is not measurable with most consumer test equipment because it's better than the test equipment. These are remarkable physical objects, the kind of engineering where you lift the platter and feel the weight shift in your hands and understand immediately that something serious was done here. The trick on the TT-101 is this: the capacitors in the servo control board are now 47 years old. Electrolytic capacitors have a service life. After about 30 to 40 years in storage, they start to drift, and when they drift, the servo loses speed stability. You'll hear it as a slight wavering on sustained piano notes, a wow that wasn't there when the table was new. A full recap kit for the TT-101 board costs $23 on eBay. It's a 2-hour job if you're comfortable with a soldering iron and a 30-minute job if you do it for a living. Know this before you buy, and you can find a TT-101 listed as not holding speed or slightly off for $150 to $200. Recap it over the weekend and you have a table that sells fully serviced for $500 to $700. Or you keep it, which is what I did. Third, the Technics SP-10 MK2. If you spend any time in serious vintage audio circles, you will hear this table mentioned with a reverence that borders on the religious, and it is largely deserved. BBC Radio used it, NHK used it. Every major broadcast facility in the world that could afford it used it. It is a direct drive table with a motor that was engineered in collaboration with Matsushida's industrial division, the same people building precision manufacturing equipment, not consumer electronics. The platter, when spinning, has the feel of a gyroscope. It does not want to be disturbed. The one thing you need to know about the SP-10 MK2 is that it is sold as a bare deck. No plinth, no tone arm. It is designed to be mounted in a custom housing, which sounds like a complication but is actually an opportunity. A slate plinth, a piece of solid Welsh or Spanish slate machined to the correct dimensions, costs $120 to $180 from a stonemason if you bring them the spec sheet, which you can find on any SP10 enthusiast forum. Add a decent tone arm, and the whole system comes in at $600 to $800 total. There is nothing available new at that price that competes with it. Nothing. 4. The Thorens TD-125 MK2, Switzerland, 1973. This is the European answer to Japanese direct drive, and it takes a completely different engineering philosophy. Belt drive, suspended sub-chassis, the platter floats on a spring system that isolates it from floor vibration and structural noise. The Thorens engineers were working from a conviction that direct drive motors, however well damped, introduce a tiny residual vibration into the platter, and that a well-designed belt drive would always be quieter into the groove. Whether they were right is an argument that has been going on since 1973 and will continue indefinitely. What is not arguable is that a TD-125 MK2 in good condition, fitted with a quality arm, is one of the most natural and musical sounding tables you can own. The trick with the TD-125 is the arm board. It is interchangeable and accepts most classic tone arms with minimal modification. If you find one with a worn or missing original arm, common because arms were often swapped or lost, you can drop in an SME-3009 or an Audiocraft AC-300 for under $150, and it fits as if it was made for it, because it essentially was. Watch for seized main bearings, which happen after years of storage. The fix is simple. Remove the bearing housing, clean out the old grease, re-grease with Rocol Sapphire or Molykote EM-30L, and reinstall. A seized bearing on an otherwise clean TD-125 knocks $80 to $120 off the asking price. It's a 20-minute repair. 5. The Pioneer PL-70L II, Japan, 1979. This is the table on this list that gets the most dismissive responses from forum veterans, and it is the one where I think they are most wrong. It looks glamorous, a large, visually elaborate deck with a smoked dust cover, an electronic auto lift, and a level of surface finish that Pioneer only applied to its flagship products. Forums tend to associate visual ambition with compromised engineering, as if a beautiful table couldn't also be a technically serious one. The PL-70L II is technically serious. The platter bearing is machined to tolerances that Pioneer never repeated in any subsequent model, and which most current mid-market tables still don't match. The motor in the later L2 variant uses a linear tracking design on some configurations. A radically different approach where the arm moves in a straight line across the record rather than the standard arc, theoretically eliminating tracking error entirely. These sell for $250 to $400 on Japanese estate sales, occasionally appearing on Bai, which is the proxy service for Yahoo Japan auctions that I use for exactly this kind of thing. The account costs nothing to open. Each bid costs about $5 in fees. Shipping from Japan runs $80 to $120 depending on the carrier. For a Pioneer PL-70L II in the $300 range plus $100 in shipping, you are in for $400 and change. The equivalent performance from a new table would cost you $2,000 at minimum. Here is what I want you to understand about all 5 of these. Their combined original retail value, adjusted to today's money, is somewhere above $25,000. The entire suite, a DP-75, a TT-101, a SP-10 MK2 in a slate plinth, a TD-125 MK2, and a PL-70L II, can be owned, fully serviced, for somewhere between $2,000 and $2,500 if you are patient and know what to look for. The people who built these tables were not making them for audiophiles. They were making them for radio engineers who needed them to run for 8 hours a day and sound perfect every time. That brief, that uncompromising professional brief, is baked into the metal and the machining and the servo circuits and the bearing tolerances of every one of these decks. You can feel it when you operate them. There is a solidity, a rightness to how they work, that is different from what you feel when you operate a table that was designed to a retail price point. The thing you can do tonight, right now, before you even finish watching this, is open a Buyee account, which takes about 3 minutes, and search for DP-75 and TT-101 on Yahoo. Japan auctions. Save the searches. Watch for 2 weeks. You will see exactly what I am describing. You will see these tables appear, often listed by people who inherited them and have no idea what they are, and you will see them go for prices that will make you feel like the whole audio press has been lying to you. It hasn't been lying exactly, it just has no mechanism for covering gear that isn't being marketed to it. Tell me in the comments, have you ever heard one of these? Or do you have a vintage table sitting under a dust cover in your lounge room that I missed? Tell me the make and model and what you paid. I read every one. Next time I am going to open up a 1977 TT-101 that came in from Japan with a dead servo board, and I am going to show you the exact $23 capacitor kit that brought it back from the dead. You will want to watch that one.